Vittorio Toscano, one of the most irritating survivors I've ever read. I mean, the more I read on this guy, the more ridiculously moronic he came across. I mean, this dude sounds like some modern self-righteous loser thrown into the Middle Ages. Look, here, get a load of this. Let's just go into it. Vittorio was born in 1343. I want you to keep that date in mind. While we don't know exactly where, based on the name, we can likely assume he was born in Italy, and based on the Wikipedia, it was all but confirmed. Anyway, now Vittorio was the youngest of three brothers, and like his brothers before him, he was sent to train in the ways of the military arts and fighting under some guy named Fabrizio or something like that, and this makes sense for the time period. Italy and Europe at this time was always plagued by small wars of land and territory, plus this was about the time the Black Plague was getting started, so, there was a lot of animosity and fear amongst a lot of people, so, it was important that lords and people of high station knew how to defend themselves and their people. Makes sense. But Vittorio didn't take to the ways of war. When he was 15 years old, he was... No. I'm going to read this straight from the source. Hold on. Here it is. Quote, as a student of philosophy, he believed physical violence to be the last refuge of the incompetent. Take your pacifist bullshit and shove it where the sun don't shine, you pretentious little... Nope, let's keep going. So apparently, his tutor was so mad at his pacifist stance, he ordered one of his pages to attack. And Vittorio, though abstaining from violence and not wanting to train in it, was able to dodge and block the blows of his attacker, and then after a perfect parry, his attacker tripped and fell on his own dagger, bleeding out in less than a minute. And Vittorio then threw down his sword and swore to never pick up a weapon again. Where do I begin with this stupid? All right, let's try to break all this down. Firstly, this is the mid-14th century. Europe at this time is suffering two major problems, both of which I mentioned: political disunity and the Black Plague. There are wars and skirmishes liable to pop up at any time, and different lords are required to at least understand the basics of warfare so as to defend their land. Vittorio is essentially insulting his family, heritage, and nation by refusing to learn the fundamentals of war, if for no other reason than self-defense. Now, here's the thing. If Vittorio had just said, you know what, man, I don't want to fight, I don't want to engage in combat with anyone. I'd rather not. It's not something I want to do. I will, of course, defend my lands. I'll, of course, hire soldiers to do it because I know the necessity of it, but I personally don't want to be a part of it. That'd have been fine. That would have been okay. Or if he'd said, you know what, man, there's a whole Black Plague thing going on. The last thing we need to be doing is focusing on warfare or fighting. I want to teach my people, medicine. I want to teach people how to save lives. I want to focus on being a refuge and shelter for people rather than a warfaring state. Again, that would have been fine. As long as he gave some rational, explainable meaning behind his pacifism. If only he'd given some kind of, understandable reason for it, like he wanted to help save lives, wanted to build a hospital, make his home into a hospital for people, or maybe he wants to, try to bring unity between different lands instead of trying to fight them. There could have been rationale, but no, his rationale is, what was it again? Hold on, I'm not sure I remember it. What was it? As a student of philosophy, he believed physical violence to be the last refuge of the incompetent. That is such a blatantly stupid and modern concept. Even in the ancient world, the concept of peace was still something that early philosophers and theologians believed was something that needed to be defended. Like, take the Romans. The idea of Pax Romana, or peaceful Rome, was something limited to within Roman civilization, but this peace needed to be protected. Why? Because whether you think they're incompetent or not, when the barbarian with the goddamn axe is swinging it at your goddamn head to cleave your self-righteous cranium from your cowardly neck, it doesn't matter how competent and superior you might feel, you are now a goddamn corpse, and you die with your self-righteousness. And like that, nothing of value is lost. Your stupid self-entitlement disappears in a splattering of blood, and all anyone will remember about you is that you were a coward who spouted his own sense of superiority while good people died. I think there was a good quote about this from the Dragon Ball Z Abridged series.
You think you're better than everyone else, but there you stand, the good man doing nothing. And while evil triumphs and your rigid pacifism crumbles into blood-stained dust, the only victory afforded to you is that you stuck true to your guns. You were a coward to your last whimper.
No, and you know what? I'm not done. This actually pisses me off. Again, if Vittorio was a modern day dude, I wouldn't care. If he had given some reason, some rationale, something he wanted to achieve through his pacifism, I might have been able to excuse it. But this is a guy from the European Middle Ages. Life is brief and rough, and wars are an ever-present possibility. Your subjects look to you as their defenders. You are a lord. You are a man who holds station. You're required to know how to protect your lands and its people, and to just say, nah, thanks, I'm too competent to engage in such things, is such a blatant insult to everyone and everything that has been a part of this. It is outstanding. Oh, and what is this student of philosophy thing? Sure, yeah, I'm sure he's familiar with Marcus Tullius Cicero, the philosopher who was the father of the just war theory, who argued that war was sometimes necessary to protect and maintain peace. Or, I'll bet he might be familiar with Aristotle, who famously said that we should make war so that we may maintain peace. In fact, most pacifist philosophers are more modern in origin because in the days Vittorio lives in, war was seen as almost a necessity. Again, if he had just said, I will protect my people in self-defense, but I'd rather not engage in combat myself, it might have been fine. I might have been okay with it if we'd gotten some kind of rationale. But to call those who do fight incompetent, go respectfully chew glass, you arrogant blowhard. Oh, and that last bit where he accidentally kills a guy by not fighting. Yeah, where do we break down that idiocy? So apparently he's going out to a training yard, right? And he says, I'm not going to train with you because I'd rather not engage in violence. And so the guy gets so mad he sends his page to attack him with a real knife? With a real dagger to attack this guy? Hold on. First of all, you sent your page with a real knife to attack the son of some lord, some high-ranking noble. Imagine if the page had killed Vittorio. Now he's in trouble with that noble. Secondly, why would you have a real knife in a training ground? Why would you pull a real knife against someone that you're trying to teach a lesson? Did the swordsman instructor just want Vittorio to die like I do? While I can respect his outlook and respect his position, I don't exactly want him to do that. I as Vittorio, wouldn't want him to do that, and maybe if I were him, I wouldn't do that because it would look very bad. But then the idea that Vittorio, who abstains from violence, abstains from combat, is somehow good enough to block, dodge, and then parry an opponent and make them fall on their own dagger. That's the other part, falling on their own dagger. You know how hard that is to do, to actually fall on your own dagger? And you know how a trained person probably would know better than to put themselves in a situation where they might do that? And if the fact is they're training with live weapons, do you really think the page is going to be holding that dagger in the way he was that he would fall on it, and wouldn't be wearing armor to protect himself? There are so many ways that didn't work, but it was clearly laid out in such a way to make Vittorio look good because, oh look, this guy died and Vittorio didn't have to engage in violence to do it. And then I throw down my sword. I will never pick up another one again. And it took him minutes to bleed out. Minutes. Where did he fall down? How did he fall on that dagger? What did it go through? His neck? Did he hold it to his throat before he fell on it? And why didn't Vittorio try to save him? If Vittorio's so against violence, maybe he's try to show compassion and try to save the page. That's never mentioned. He just falls on his dagger. It's done. I know that I am riding this like a horse, but you need to understand how much that pissed me off. But it doesn't get better. Oh, guys, it doesn't get better. Oh, this. All right, so let's move on. Okay, all right, back to the lore. So Vittorio was sent off to study philosophy under his uncle and learn about ancient texts and ideas. Learning about guardians in every century and culture, but said to be from another dimension, a perfect world. Vittorio discovered these guardians he was researching were keepers of ancient and arcane knowledge that would help humanity to rise to a higher plane of existence. But they were just waiting on humanity to gain wisdom and knowledge. I feel like I've heard that kind of thing before. I feel like we've gotten that kind of plot point in a lot of different stories. But anyway, they traveled the world in search of them. Vittorio and his uncle, I mean. And again, this is quite the feat during the plague era. But this makes me think that perhaps Vittorio comes from a mercantile family or some kind of mercantile trade business. Like they traveled around as merchants. Because the plague didn't completely destroy travel. But it would have made travel more difficult. And it also would have meant that he would have seen the effects of the plague everywhere he went. Maybe that could have been a motivation. Maybe he could have been seeking these guys, to help people. But again, it comes down to that self-righteous BS. He doesn't give any reason why he abstains from violence, but he doesn't have any, kind or generous bone in his body. He's not abstaining from violence to save other people because he doesn't do anything to save people at all throughout his lore. Whatever. Anyway, back to it. His uncle dies due to a venomous snake bite and left Vittorio to inherit his estate and continue their work. In the year 1391, Vittorio prepared to go to Sintra in Portugal to uncover a heavily guarded artifact in the catacombs, and he decides to employ a knight named Tarhos to act as his protection. I'm going to repeat that because I don't think you guys heard it, and if you did hear it, your brain probably switched off and switched back on. It's quite impressive. Here it is. Vittorio decides to employ a knight named Tarhos to act as his protection. Really? You hired a knight to protect you? So man spends the first half of his lore reminding us on how violence is bad and only used by the incompetent, but he's apparently in need of a guardian to protect him. Well, how will he protect you, Vittorio? By what means would he need to protect you? Violence? Oh, but would that not make you an employer of one of these incompetent thugs you have such an issue with? How does that feel, you backwards-ass, self-righteous doofus? We're all high and mighty until people start waving swords in our face, huh? Yeah, it's that whole hypocrisy that kind of gets to me. Why not use your philosophy studies and your competent scholarly skills to persuade your enemies into not resorting to violence? Or maybe you could use your magical matrix powers to make all your enemies fall on their daggers again. Huh. You know, I think it was Thucydides who said the society that separates its scholars from its warriors will have its thinking done by cowards and its fighting done by fools. No, I'm not letting this go. I swear this is... I have respect for people who fight and die for things they believe in. I have respect for warriors. To have someone say, I abstain from violence does not bother me. To have someone say, I abstain from violence because people who use violence are incompetent fools, that gets me. And to have him hire a knight for personal protection infuriates me even more because it's blatant hypocrisy. No, I don't want to engage in violence. I don't want to be one of these incompetent fools, but I will hire those incompetent fools to protect me from the big bad people who want to hurt me. Okay, well, turns out that the knight that Vittorio hired saw his employer as a coward and betrayed him, throwing him in a dungeon, and decided to go after the artifact himself. You know what? I'm kind of on the knight's side here. I know he's an evil bastard, and we did a whole video about how evil he is and about how awful he is. But you know what? I'm on his side. Team Knight all the way. Vittorio, before wasting away, decided to try and draw a symbol in his cell that he'd seen from the Guardians, and at last something happened. He passed through into a world of fog and evil! And that's how he ended up in the realm of the entity. You know, I think I've explained well enough why Vittorio annoys me. His pacifist bullshit doesn't fit within the time he was around, and it makes very little sense for him to build up this viewpoint. There was no trauma he suffered or reason for why he feels this way. Most philosophers he would have had access to would not have supported his moral standpoint, and it all gets sillier when you see him hypocritically hire mercenaries for self-defense when he's the one who claims violence is never the proper answer. But moving away from that, the other big problem is this whole time travel thing. Apparently, if you get a lot of different outfits for Vittorio, you see he wears all kinds of different outfits and styles from different realms. But the lore does not say that he went to these different times. It says that he went into the entity's realm, but he's been in the entity's realm so long he was somehow exposed to all these things? Maybe it's because I just don't understand the entity's realm well enough, but how does that work? I mean, it would have been one thing if he traveled through time thanks to the entity, but it was all just a ruse so that the entity could lure him in, but I don't know. I just don't get it, and frankly, I don't want to get it. I just do not like this character. I feel like Vittorio was a complete waste. He seems like some trendy hippie that writers wanted to have contrast with a more bloodthirsty knight, and it didn't work. But it makes sense, doesn't it? We have a knight who believes in war and combat above all things, very much a warmonger from For Honor kind of thing. He just wants to fight and prove his strength and valor and find this new world he wants through violence. Whereas Vittorio believes that peace is the way to go, peace is the way to be, and he's not going to engage in fighting, but his idealism is so backwards ass and stupid. I hate it. But let's be honest, y'all don't care about that. Y'all want to know about his perks. All right, let's talk perks. Vittorio runs Fogwise, Potential Energy, and Quick Gambit. First of all, Fogwise. This one is pretty straightforward. If you get a great skill check, you'll see the killer's aura for 6 seconds. I love the quote that comes with it, though, because some perks come with a survivor or killer quote, and the quote is, I have seen great cruelty, and I have also seen another way. What other way is that, pray tell? Running with your tail between your legs. Ooh, an inspiration to live by. But yeah, the perk itself is fine. It pairs well with Stakeout and Hyperfocus and Fast Track as a good, great skill check build that capitalizes on succeeding those skill checks. So nothing wrong with Fogwise. Then there's potential energy. This is unquestionably Vittorio's best perk of all. Potential energy is the ally of every gen rusher. If you work on a generator uninterrupted for a total of 8 seconds, you can activate this ability to use potential energy. If you continue to work on the generator while activating potential energy, instead of repairing it, you will instead charge potential energy with 1.5% completion, converting to 1 token for a maximum of 20 tokens. Once you have fully charged the perk to 20 tokens, you will automatically return to repairing the generator. While potential energy has tokens, you can press the ability button at any time while working on the generator and pay all tokens to add repair progress to the generator with 1 point of progression per token, meaning you could add a total of 20 points of progression to a generator immediately. Now, you will hold all these tokens you've accumulated until you either spend them on a generator or you lose a health state by any means. Now, I adore this perk, but I like to only use it when I'm working on a generator with a buddy if I can. This way, while they keep making progress, I can charge potential energy. Then once it's fully charged, I'll save my tokens until my next generator, unless the killer finds us. If the killer approaches me while I'm working on this generator, I'll just immediately push all my tokens into the generator to make up for lost time and hopefully buy more time for the generator. Honestly, this is a really, really, really good perk. Vittorio I may not like, but this is a great perk. And finally, Quick Gambit. This is actually a handy perk to have. When you're being chased, this perk activates and the following effects are applied. First, you can see the auras of all other survivors, and second, the repair speed of other survivors is increased by 5%. If you lose a health state, this perk deactivates and takes 60 seconds to reactivate. Now, this is a great perk for players who are good at evading the killer and keeping him busy, but, again, I love the quote written here. Can we read the quote? "We need not resort to violence, and I shall prove it." Yeah, bro. You're right. You're real good at running away. My goodness, you are a paragon of strength. Oh, by the way, on that note, while we're talking about that, if you play Vittorio, you now canonically you are not allowed to use any of the following perks. You cannot use Decisive Strike, Power Struggle, or Head On. You also are not allowed to pallet stun the killer. All of these are violent in nature, and you cannot do these things. Otherwise, you are a hypocrite, and you are not a true Vittorio, just a poser. So please, if you run Vittorio, I better not catch you running any of those perks or trying to pallet stun me. That's violence. In fact, shooting a flashlight in my face is probably violence too. You probably shouldn't do that. Vittorio, you just need to run. You need to run from the killer because that's your idea of strength and competence. I don't like Vittorio. If you couldn't tell that by now, I don't like Vittorio. All right, so that does it for this video on Vittorio. And if you do like Vittorio, good. I'm glad you do. I despise him. I will no longer play him now that that now that I'm done with this, now that I am done with this video, I will not touch him again. I refuse to deal with the survivor. But we're moving on to the next chapter of Dead by Daylight anyway. And this next chapter has come with a unique pair of survivors with unique perks and an incredibly controversial killer. But we'll get to all that next time in The Fog. Take care.